And it was in that moment that I'm like, you know, this friend of mine, he was right. I was wrong. Inflation is something that the Canadian dollar faces. It is something that the US dollar faces. It is something that we as Western countries deal with. It's not just for, South America or other parts of the world. It is something real. And those things like I think we need a free society. So
Hmm.
it's not just for me, it's also for everybody else. And I want to have the sovereignty, right? I want to be able to say something and do something, obviously within the bounds kind of the law, but not have, basically the government say, well, turn off his bank account. He can't access his money. But sorry, that's the time that God has given me, right? That I've now saved in, dollars, right? Like that's my time. If you're freezing that, you're stealing my time that God has given me, right? So that's why I don't want to trust a third party to store my time that God has given me. And that's why I'm staying with Bitcoin is the self-sovereignty is that I can actually physically hold my Bitcoin and it's like it's mine. It's not something that I have to trust somebody else with.
It's starting to look like this Bitcoin thing is here to stay.
Welcome to Why Bitcoin Wins, brought to you by Beaver Bitcoin, your best non custodial Bitcoin exchange in Canada. I'm your host, Shravan Jhangiani. Today I'm joined by Canadian Bitcoiner Joel, a truth, a truth seeker on Bitcoin Twitter, who is building his own Bitcoin clothing brand called Hodlman's Apparel. Welcome to the pod, Joel.
Thanks for having me on.
Thanks for being here. So, Joel, the way we're going to do this is I'm going to ask you a few questions. And the best place to start, you know, this podcast is called Why Bitcoin Wins. So, we love to understand why our guests think that Bitcoin wins, right? And that, to do that, I feel like the best place to start is your origin story. So, Joel, take us back to how did Bitcoin enter your life and what made you stay?
I didn't stay. That's part of the story, actually. The Bitcoin origin for me starts in 2013. September 2013, the price of Bitcoin was $124. A good friend of mine who I was working for, so he would have been like my dad's age. I'm like this is the September after high school, so I'm 18 years old, just kind of figuring out what life is. And he pulls me inside of a room and starts to tell me about this thing called Bitcoin. And he is basically telling me that this is an inflation hedge and I need to worry about inflation, so I need to get this thing Bitcoin. Like he was telling me, like it's basically the end of the world. You need to get this right now. And I remember laughing at him and saying that inflation is for the Argentine peso. And again, I don't blame myself for having that thought. I'm 18 years old. I don't know a lot about money, all that sort of stuff. And the ego in me and where I got things wrong was that I put my faith and my trust in the dollar and saw the dollar as something that was good.
Hmm.
But he was someone who was putting tens of thousands of dollars away in Bitcoin. So he had a huge conviction and was buying miners. I helped him set up miners in his basement and
What year
and
was
all
it?
that sort of stuff. This is 2013, the end of
2013.
2013.
Got it.
So slightly after, so this is September 2013, October, mid-October, I think is when the peak of like 700 happened. And then shortly thereafter, you have Silk Road is taken down, all that sort of stuff. And the thought that I had even before Silk Road was that Bitcoin was just going to be something that was used for criminals. And in talking with him and kind of doing my own research, I definitely saw that there was a value to Bitcoin. In 2013, I thought that the price, and some of that was some of what he was saying too, but was that the price of Bitcoin would go up to $500,000. So I thought that Bitcoin would appreciate in price, but it just wasn't something that I saw was a need from an inflationary standpoint, and two, it wasn't something that I wanted to interact with the people who were holding Bitcoin or were going to be using Bitcoin. Like I don't want to associate myself with criminals,
Hmm.
which is kind of funny. You use the dollar, and the people who issue the dollar are basically criminals. So it's something that because
Ironic
he had
from
such,
that
right,
perspective.
it really is ironic. And over the years, because he had such great conviction in it, I always kind of kept my ear on the ground for what was happening in Bitcoin. You know, for months there, it probably was like a daily thing. I would look at the price, I would look at, some Bitcoin stuff, which turned into like a weekly thing, which turned into a monthly thing, which, back to a weekly, back to a monthly, back and forth. So, I spend a bunch of years just kind of passively seeing this Bitcoin thing, right? And over time, I can't deny that the price is going up. But in the back of my head, I'm always still going, but it's going to be used for criminal activity. So it's not something I want to associate with. And then we fast forward to 2021. And my son is just born. So this is probably, my son was born on January 7th. It was in between January 7th and my birthday, which is on Thursday, which is January 15th. So right around this time in
I'm Jan
2021.
17, so we're all
Oh, really?
Capricorns.
The last person I told that I was born on the 15th, they laughed and said they were born on the 17th as well. So that
Nice.
must be a good day.
We've got our birthdays
Um,
coming up.
right. So happy birthday.
Happy birthday to you and
Um,
your son.
Thank you. Yeah, and we just celebrated, and he would have just turned 5. So, really exciting time in our
Awesome.
household that way. And but yeah, I'm now. I remember looking and holding this baby and looking in his eyes, and we've just gone through 2020, which the pandemic hit, the world is turned upside down. And it was the real first bit of like, what is inflation for me, right? With the money printing, with the stimulus checks that were going out from the Canadian government to all of the money that was being spent on flipping the world upside down and making the changes that, needed to happen, right? And I'm looking at him and going, here's this innocent child that has absolutely no say in what is going on today in terms of financial policies and money debasement and all this sort of stuff. But he's the one that's going to end up taking the brunt of this for the next 70 years of his life or longer. And that calculation was just based on what happened in 2021 or where we are like through 2020,
Right.
knowing that the vaccines still needed to be rolled out, were still going to be implemented, and there was still going to be a ton of money being spent and printed by the Canadian government, by the US government, and around the world. And it was in that moment that I'm like, you know, this friend of mine, he was right. I was wrong. Inflation is something that the Canadian dollar faces. It is something that the US dollar faces. It is something that we as Western countries deal with. It's not just for, South America or other parts of the world. It is something real. And I decided that I am someone who I don't really act on emotion. I don't act on just on a whim. I think things through. I'm methodical. I have strategy, right? So I decided for myself, if this was something that I needed to get into, I needed to learn and understand. So for the next few months, I decided, I'm just going to learn about Bitcoin, which opened up the door to learning about stocks and what finances are, and which ultimately also ended up opening up the door to what are altcoins and all that sort of stuff. And we now get to like mid October. I feel like I kind of know what's going on and have enough confidence that like, hey, I can put the money aside into these, I'll say it now, like three categories of buying the stocks like Apple, Tesla, Shopify, those kind of, blue chip stocks that I had confidence in or knowledge and people were kind of recommending of getting. And then there's Bitcoin, and then there was like a small allocation at first to Ethereum as well. And I'll say that like getting into altcoins and Ethereum just completely confused me more on what Bitcoin actually was, and all of that. But yeah, that's kind of my entry, like into Bitcoin, and where I kind of return to Bitcoin, is October of 2021, and then. So my buy-in is 67K. A few days or a few weeks later, we hit 69K. Everybody's going nuts and saying the price is going to 120. And I'm like, oh, sweet. Like I got in right at a great time. This is going to be exciting. And just kind of waiting for that blow off top. And that never comes. And there's kind of like the disappointment. But in the disappointment was like, all right, this is my opportunity to buy at lower prices where I could have bought. And obviously, I never thought that the price would go back down to 124, where I could have first entered and held Bitcoin. Um, but I saw it as an opportunity. So I decided, for a while, I would just dollar cost average every day. I have a certain amount of Bitcoin or sorry, a certain amount of dollars that I would just set, auto buy, and buy Bitcoin that way. And in the fall of 2022, we unexpectedly had our third child. By unexpectedly, I mean he came early. He came six
Right.
weeks early.
Okay.
Weren't planning when we went into the hospital to have a baby, but here we are having a baby and sitting in McMaster's Children's Hospital in the NICU. And now again, almost 2 years later, I'm looking at another baby, saying, here's an innocent baby who had no decision on what his life circumstances are, that he's struggling to breathe. We're questioning whether we're going to leave the hospital with him. We're questioning if we are leaving the hospital, what is life going to look like for him and all that sort of stuff. And it was in that moment that I kind of looked at him and and not that I actually looked, but I thought about the amount of money that we had in a bank. I was like, I know that this money is going to be devalued, and we are going to likely need a safety net and have an emergency fund for my child here. He's going to need some real expenses he's probably going to need throughout his life. And in that moment, I decided to basically take everything that we have and put that all big lump sum into Bitcoin.
Okay.
And thankfully, that price was 17 and a half. A couple days later, we went down to 15, and we left the NICU, and the price of Bitcoin was in the 20s. Like it was a perfect moment to do it, but it wasn't out of like I'm not a chart guy. It wasn't like I was looking at it going like, here's going to be the bottom. I actually was sitting there thinking that the price was probably going to go down closer to $10,000, $7,000. But because I've been looking at Bitcoin for the last 9 years, I've seen that the price is over the long haul always gone up. So even if the price went down to $10,000, 17's low enough, and the price is going to be greater than 17. So what do I actually have to fear here? What I had to fear there was what actually played out, that if I waited another month, I'd be buying higher, right? And that was my fear, that I didn't want to be buying at 25K. I didn't want to be buying at 30K. So thankfully for me, on both ends, my Bitcoin buy was a great timely buy. And my son, we just celebrated his third birthday in November. So he did make it out of the hospital. He's doing well and great health. So that's awesome.
It's amazing.
But in the journey, there's kind of these two aha moments for me that I guess I would like to share and talk about a little bit. And the first is um, reading the Bitcoin Standard. And for anybody who's been in Bitcoin for a while, probably has read the book Bitcoin Standard by Saifedean. And that was kind of my aha moment of not just what Bitcoin was, but what the dollar is and what the dollar isn't, and why the dollar is something that I don't want to hold, and how it really just systematically is a melting ice cube. The intention of the people that are printing the money is to essentially devalue your dollars. Like they have a target inflation rate of 2%. So just if you take them at face value for what they want to do is they want to take 2% of the value of the dollar that you earn today next year, right? Like that to me doesn't seem right, doesn't seem
Mm-hmm.
fair, and I don't
And that's the
understand
goal.
quite how that's the intended goal, and I don't understand, or I kind of get what they're saying, but it doesn't make sense to me why we would want to devalue something. And they see this as a positive. They see this as something that's needed. And Bitcoin obviously offers a different alternative to that. It's a capped set supply. The issuance is also set, which is maybe a little bit different to gold, that you can't just go mine more Bitcoin today. Like, regardless of how many people want to mine Bitcoin today, the same amount of Bitcoin is being issued. Where if somebody wanted to go like mine gold today, just today, they could mine more gold and take more gold out of the ground on the daily, right? So and then the second, and I would say for me is kind of the bigger part for who I am, is in my searching on what Bitcoin is early on, and I would still say today I listen to them a little bit, is the Canadian Bitcoin podcast with Joey and Len. And they had on a pastor that goes by Pastor Coin, Alan Armstrong, who's a Canadian as well. Um, Talk about Bitcoin. And I remember when he started the pod, I was like, yikes, a pastor talking about Bitcoin and a pastor talking about finances. Like, this is not, there's just a lot out in the world about like prosperity gospel and not great things that I would say pastors are talking about when it comes to money. So it was something that when the episode started, I had a lot of red flags that were coming up and just kind of cringing. Um, I finished the podcast being like, wow, like that was a really great podcast. I need to actually listen to this again today and kind of digest and chew on some of the stuff. And very much agreed with what Alan had to say. And that was kind of my journey of like kind of from a secular standpoint, like Bitcoin is good and Bitcoin is needed. But here's where if I consider God to be my Lord, He's my Lord of my whole life. I can't separate something from Him. So in every area of my life, I need the Lord because He's the Lord. He's the king over everything that I do, right? So if Bitcoin doesn't align with that, well, then Bitcoin, even though maybe from a secular standpoint might make sense, it's not good in the eyes of the Lord. Well, then it's not good. And that was kind of, I guess, my thought in 2013 was that if it's for criminal activity, it's not something that honors God. It's not something that I want to associate with.
Okay.
And how I see it fitting into my faith is Jesus talks about what are the two greatest commandments. And the greatest commandment is to love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, strength, right? And the greatest asset that God gives us, the most scarce asset that every single one of us have is time. So when I go to work, I exchange my time, my energy, and my effort for something, and that something is the Canadian dollar. Now, if I save and work in the Canadian dollar and I store my time and my energy that God has given me in something that we have already stated is devalued, that's actually not loving the creator that has given me that time. And likewise, the second greatest commandment is to love your neighbor as yourself. So there's actually two things there. There's that I need to love myself to love my neighbor as myself. So if I am working for something that can be devalued, which is based on my time, it's actually not loving myself because I'm not loving and respecting the time that I have here on earth. And likewise, if I am to give my neighbor a dollar that I don't think has any value and think is intrinsically bad, I'm not loving them,
Mm-hmm.
showing them what they're worth, and in turn, not loving God because I'm not loving the person that He also has created and is an image bearer of God as well. So it's just really hit me from a Christian faith standpoint that Bitcoin is, when I see Bitcoin and I look at it from my faith perspective, like I can't unsee the connections of the two and why I as a Christian have really no option but to be in Bitcoin. And that's not to say that Christians who don't understand Bitcoin are somehow sinning. They don't know Bitcoin, right? So I can't fault them for that. But when you see Bitcoin from a Christian perspective as a Christian, like to me, it's really hard not to see another way. It's the ultimate way for me, economically speaking, to love the Lord, my God, to love myself and to love others, which is what we're called to do. So.
But why is Bitcoin okay from a Christianity standpoint relative to a different mode of inflation protection?
Right. So it's again, it goes back to the time aspect. It's not something, it's something that protects the time, right? That God has given me. And it's something that doesn't steal, it doesn't cheat, it doesn't lie. Like it is honest and true. Where if we look at the dollar, it's something that is devalued, that is manipulated. It's a scale of unjust weights. Jesus talks about that as well of don't steal that way. Don't, the money changers were tipping the scale in their favor on a sell, and they were tipping the money scales on a buy. Like it was always in favor for the money changers. It's the same in the system today. Like the banks always win. It doesn't matter if they're selling or they're buying. The central bank always wins. The people that are closest to the money printer always win, and they're always stealing essentially our time unjustifiably. And the dollar, the fiat dollar, is an unjust system, where Bitcoin is a just system because it's rooted in truth, it's rooted in code, it's rooted in math and all of that. It's something that we can take our time and we can transport that over space and time.
Awesome, man. So what was your timing for reading the Bitcoin Standard?
The Bitcoin Standard I would have read early 2022, and I think it was later on I had listened to that podcast with Alan that kind of put me down the rabbit hole of Christianity and the Bible.
Right. So you heard about Bitcoin 2013. You started buying 2021 almost at the top.
Yeah.
That's when you really started studying, and it wasn't until end of 2022 when you went all in. What do you think it is? Like, what is the main reason you feel that you were so attracted to Bitcoin? Because when I hear your story, you know, the main theme that I hear is inflation protection. And arguably, you could do that with, you know, a different investment. You could do that with the S&P 500. You could do that with the Nasdaq 100. You could do that with my old employer Google stock, which is doing very well right now. What was it that what is it that you feel, kept having you go back to Bitcoin? And the reason that I'm pressing on this is, as I said, the name of the show is Why Bitcoin Wins. And I really want listeners to be able to drill down on what is it that really, gets you, Joel, to have that level of conviction to go all in to Bitcoin. What is it about Bitcoin?
I think in my journey, there's a couple things. And I would say that Bitcoin wins. I would also say that gold wins, silver wins. The S&P 500 is going to win.
Hmm.
When you're like you've mentioned, if we look at it just from an inflation standpoint, these are asset classes that are going to pace inflation or slightly outpace inflation.
Right.
Why I kept going back to Bitcoin is because my exposure to it, it's not something that, like Apple stock, Google stock, all that. Like, yes, I knew about Apple and I knew about Google, obviously from a younger age of like using those ecosystems. It's not something that I ever watched what the price was. So I think early on for me, the reason why I was attracted to Bitcoin is because I had somebody else in my life that was very invested in it and had a conviction himself in it. And the exposure to it over the 8, 9 years prior to actually jumping in, like feet fully, completely, like head first, like that helped in the conviction. Uh, Secondary to it is probably just the ease as to which I was able to get into it. And I mean, stock platforms like Wealth Simple and that sort of stuff have made it pretty easy, like Robinhood, all of that have made it easy to get into stock trading. But I remember when I started kind of the journey, and I guess my financial started around 2019 when we had our first child. We sat down with a financial advisor, and I had brought up Bitcoin at the time, and he kind of looked at me like, I don't really know about Bitcoin. It's not something I offer in a portfolio, nor can I do that for you. So if that's something you want to do, like you can do that on your own. But this is kind of what I'm looking at. So, but I guess it bothered me that I had to go to somebody else to kind of figure that out and pay somebody else to get information, and that they would take a percentage of like my earnings. And I remember turning to my dad and being like, hey, like, can you help me navigate finances this way? Like, how do I buy stocks? What stocks? Like, how do you sell? And all that. And he looked at me, he's like, Joel, I've never bought a stock before. Like, I worked a pension job, and my employer just did it for me. The pension plan, set it out. And I'm like, okay, well, like, I want to kind of figure this out for myself. And not to say that my dad somehow how failed, but he just trusted somebody else in a third party, and that sort of stuff. And he wasn't able to share anything with me. And I think as I'm now looking at three children, it's something of a responsibility that I think I have to sort of figure out to be able to teach them and pass down, and why I ultimately think that Bitcoin will win. And I mentioned that, I do think other asset classes move higher. I think they appreciate in value. Is that at the end of the day, I believe that Bitcoin will move higher than anything else from an inflation standpoint. But it's those other things that, yes, maybe I was here for the number go up. Maybe I was here for the price appreciation, the protection against inflation. Where I'm probably staying with Bitcoin more than anything else is the fact that I can hold it myself, and that I don't have to have permission. I remember when I was a kid with my first job, my employer was like, it was kind of somebody that I was working for. It was an organization, but they had just kind of hired me as extra summer help. And I just basically worked 8 weeks with no pay, and then at the end of 8 weeks, they gave me a paycheck, and it was a paycheck. Like, I worked a couple days a week or something like that. It wasn't much money, and minimum wage was pretty low back then. So it was maybe like a check of 2,500 bucks, $3,000 for the summer. And I remember walking into my bank, and again, not knowing full terminology, I said, I want, like, can I cash this check? And she looked at me and she's like, you want to cash this check? I'm like, yeah, I want to cash this check. Now, I was meaning I wanted to deposit the check,
Right.
but I said cash the check. So, she's questioning me, like, why do I want this money? She ends up giving me all of this cash.
Right.
I'm like, A, I don't really want to walk around because I'm like going to the mall. I don't want to walk around with all of this cash, but
Right.
also I'm thinking to myself, if I really wanted the cash, why were you asking me all of those questions? Like, it it,
Mm-hmm.
it shouldn't matter why I want this money, or what I'm doing, and all that sort of stuff,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that day kind of has always stuck with me. And when we look at like what happened over the pandemic, whether it was churches being kind of shut down by the government, or the truckers convoy here in Canada, or other stuff that we saw around the world, whether you agree with those things or not, it's something that I don't want the government to do something and tell me what I have to think, and what I can do and what I can't do. And that goes to, like, I'm a Christian, and I might not want people doing certain things, right? But I also don't want the government coming in and telling them that they can't worship. I don't want the government saying that they can't do those things. Like, I think we need a free society. So
Mm-hmm.
it's not just for me, it's also for everybody else. And I want to have the sovereignty, right? I want to be able to say something and do something, obviously within the bounds kind of the law, but not have, basically the government say, well, turn off his bank account. He can't access his money. But sorry, that's the time that God has given me, right? That I've now saved in, dollars, right? Like, that's my time. If you're freezing that, you're stealing my time that God has given me, right? So that's why I don't want to trust a third party to store my time that God has given me. And that's why I'm staying with Bitcoin, is the self-sovereignty, is that I can actually physically hold my Bitcoin, and it's like it's mine. It's not something that I have to trust somebody else with.
So self custody is a massive component for you.
It's a huge component and it's a huge part of Bitcoin. And yes, I think they're like I love what Beaver's doing about being a non-custodial platform. Like that's awesome. Is there a space and time for custodial platforms? Yes, I'm not going to completely talk against that or even completely talk about having coins on an exchange. I think it's an entry point.
Hmm.
It's something that can be a little bit maybe like it's an on-ramp, on-off, but at the end of the day, like my goal and what I look at is that I want Bitcoin, right? I don't necessarily want to sell my Bitcoin $4 to then buy something. Like I want to, if I'm going to be buying something, I would love to sell and interact in Bitcoin. Though, I mean, we're in 2026, there is the need to sell your Bitcoin for actual dollars to be able to buy the goods and services that you want. And yes, obviously there's some circular economies and there's ways to work around some of that sort of stuff and all of that. So I do think that, custodial platforms and even just having some money on an exchange might be something for some people to do. But at the end of the day, I think holding your own coins um, is really what Satoshi envisioned with what Bitcoin was going to be, that you didn't need to trust somebody else, though you can have that option if that's what you want, right? And I do think that if you're like the alternative is to hold into a bank, right? So if you're going to trust a custodian in with Bitcoin, like I think that's still better than holding money in a bank, but there can be a better alternative, right? So yeah.
Right. So, so you mentioned, platforms like Wealthsimple. Um, those don't allow you to hold your own Bitcoin. Um, but you know, you, how do you feel about this? You feel like there's a uh, percentage of Bitcoin you want to hold in not an exchange, but on a platform. There's a percentage of Bitcoin that you want to hold in self custody, and then that allows you to tap into the fiat system as you sort of need to. Is that the way you overall think about it?
No, I would say I think the greatest thing is to be 100% self-custody Bitcoin. Um, though I don't think that everybody's circumstances are that.
Right.
And everybody kind of has to find their own journey that way. And that's why I'm saying like I wouldn't crash down on somebody who is not 100% self-custody. And I would say like I've put that as the gold standard. Like I currently have some coins on an exchange right now, right? Like I don't meet that standard myself, right? Just like I would say that the gold standard is Jesus, I consider myself a Christian. I fall short every single day of the honor and glory of God, right? But that doesn't take away from the fact that I love the Lord. It doesn't take away the fact that like here's what I want to do,
Right.
right? So
So you
like
don't
yeah, if
have
we're
to be
getting into
perfect. You don't have to be perfect, but you gotta get as close to that as you possibly can.
Yeah, and I think there's also like a conviction and understanding with that, and somebody who's just getting in might not want to do that. And I think there's also the question on ETFs and treasury companies and that sort of stuff. Like how and why do you play around with that? And for me, I do hold ETFs and I do hold MSTR and
Hmm.
that's basically mostly of what I hold. And the reason why I hold that for myself is because I already had money in like TFSAs prior to really getting into Bitcoin. So
Right.
again, am I right? Am I wrong? In my gold standard, I would say I'm probably wrong. Like I should just cash those out.
Hmm.
But, and maybe that's where I lack the actual conviction to be able to do that. But that's why for me, I still have like money in those accounts that are in other instruments, being the ETFs and strategy. And the way that I personally look at those things is that for me and my family, one of the things that we would love to do is to be able to own a home one day. To own a home, we're going to have to more than likely at least, and hopefully like that's in the nearer term future. So it's not going to be something that's farther out that I'm actually buying a home with Bitcoin. It's going to be
Right.
something that I'm going to be buying a home with Canadian dollars. So like the way that I look at my TFSA and all of that is just like that's
That's your down
my
payment.
Bitcoin for down payments and helping with that sort of stuff. And again, am I right? Am I wrong? I don't know. And I would say that if I own the home, I'm probably not having the TFSA. I probably would convert all to Bitcoin, though. Do you make the argument that you can hold, small amounts of dollars in a TFSA so it's not taxable, so that if you did have to liquidate and that
Hmm.
sort of stuff? But I think at the end of the day, what you can and can't do with actual Bitcoin, whether you wanted to loan against it, like you can't loan against an ETF, you can't loan against MSTR. Now you could leverage it, I guess, in a non-registered account and get money that way. Like I guess there is some ways to sort of loan against it, but yeah, when you're talking about um, like the ability to do something on your own terms and not needing the permission, which is kind of why I'm really staying with Bitcoin over anything else. Uh, Cold storage Bitcoin that you have is the only way that you're actually able to live that out. So that's
Right.
kind of the gold standard.
Yeah, I think there's no right answers. There's a reason why it's called personal finance because there's so many components to it that are so personal to your situation. Like you want to buy a house, for example. And I think, I mean, the way that I look at it is the self custody Bitcoin is the stash that you will never sell. That's like um, you know, the way that I would think about holding physical gold. Just kind of hold it, pass it on to the next generation. And then there's, real life business that you probably need to do to some degree in fiat. That could be your actual business, that could be your down payment for your home, that could be paying for a wedding, etc. Which today, Bitcoin may not be at that medium of exchange, uh, perfect level where we can just hold self custody Bitcoin and do everything in Bitcoin. And so these are the small decisions that you kind of have to, or not so small. They could be big decisions that you have to make for yourself, and in your portfolio construct. Is that
Right. The only thing that I would say to it though is that the reason why we're not on a Bitcoin standard as the monetary unit of exchange is because we also still support, right? And I think that's why I suggest that the gold standard is to be all Bitcoin, is not really to have the ETFs, is not to have the exchanges and all that sort of stuff, is
Mhm.
because by holding the dollar and still denominating in the dollar, we're still giving credit and air and life to that system that isn't. But at the same time, when I look at my family and I look at my friends, most of them don't own Bitcoin. Most of them don't have Bitcoin. So in a way, as much as I would love to see the Canadian dollar just collapse, as much as I would love to see the American dollar just collapse, because I think it's intrinsically evil, um, it's also something that a lot of people are going to be hurt by. So before that happens, I do hope that, unselfishly, I hope that the dollar stays around longer than, maybe what I would hope it stays around with, so that there's the least calamity around the people that I love the most.
right? Yeah, I think gold bugs can relate to that sentiment, right? Because it's the same thesis, right? I don't believe in fiat currencies, and therefore these gold rocks are the way to go. But at the same time, you know that if the whole fiat system collapses and we actually go back to gold rocks, then we're going to have many, many, many problems, right? Now, Bitcoin fixes most of those problems, and so we could have a viable Bitcoin standard world. When is that going to happen is to be seen. It doesn't look like it's going to happen overnight, but you know, who knows? Who knows when that time will be? If it will be in our lifetimes or not,
I hope
is
so.
remains to be seen, right?
I hope to see it.
It would be cool for sure. What do you think is the best way to teach Bitcoin, right? So you mentioned faith is such a big component for you. And just in talking to you, I feel like you are someone who spends a lot of time orange pilling people or talking about Bitcoin with people. Uh, and you seem to do it with a lot of grace. You seem to do it with not the, toxic Bitcoiner attitude that you may see on Bitcoin Twitter. So, what's your approach to teaching Bitcoin without ego, with grace, to newcomers?
Yeah, I think it's just that. It's meeting where people are at, and it's recognizing that, when we look at my journey, for how many years did I reject it,
Hmm.
right? So who am I to say that I'm better than somebody? Who am I to say that I have somehow landed on Bitcoin and I'm smarter than anyone else? Like, I am the first to recognize that I, Joel, am not a master of anything. I would consider myself to be a smart guy, knowledgeable on, many topics, but I'm not a master in one thing. Like, there's nothing of me that's a standout thing. It's not like I'm, an awesome business person, or I'm an extremely effective leader, or I'm even a good communicator. Like, there's not something that's just like sexy or big about who I am, right? I'm just a regular, ordinary person who, by the grace of God, stumbled upon Bitcoin and was introduced to Bitcoin. And, through my life circumstances, never kind of left Bitcoin, right? And was able to get into it. And, you know, that's the way that I look at it with other people. It's not like I talk about Bitcoin with somebody and they don't get it. And I'm just like, when like in one of the emails with Satoshi's like, if you don't get it, I don't have the time for you. And I get what he was saying. And I'm not going to say that I don't have that with some people, because if I'm just going to continue bringing you to the water, I can't force you to drink it. Like,
Hmm.
I only have so much time on this earth, and there's so many other people that also need to hear, so I'm just going to move on. But it's
Hmm.
also recognizing that there's a system and there's a worldview. There are presuppositions that have to be broken down to be able to understand Bitcoin. And it's something that, there's a comfort level in knowing what you know, right? There's an ease to just continue dealing with the dollar because everybody deals with the dollar. It's hard to step out of that. And I have felt that myself. I have felt the ostracism and being laughed at by people of like, why are you in Bitcoin? Like, that's crazy internet money. That's silly. That's stupid type thing. And, you know, in my circle of friends at times, like, I've looked like the idiot in the room when the price is going down. But then when the price is going up, everybody's kind of all like, hey, like, can you talk about that thing again? And they might buy a little bit and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, I would love to say that I've orange pilled more people than I have. I would say that that number is actually probably quite low. It's probably under 10 people of actually orange pilling. I think.
And even when you do orange pill them, it's not like they actually go and, do it correctly, right? It's
Right.
sometimes they'll just go buy IBIT or they'll just go buy MSTR or oh yeah, I have Bitcoin. Oh yeah, okay. Do you have Bitcoin? Yeah, yeah, but I own MicroStrategy, so I have Bitcoin. So it's not fully at that point. You're not fully orange pilled yet, right?
I think I'm more someone who, with the people around me, it's more something that I approach it with the grace and compassion that you had mentioned, but I don't see it as orange pilling. I see is that I'm just planting seeds.
Right.
I'm planting seeds that are trying to break and discredit the current system. So it might just be talking about stuff, and I'm not even bringing up the word Bitcoin or even talking about Bitcoin, but I'm talking about, well, like, that actually sounds pretty bad that, we're debasing the money. Like, that doesn't seem fair. Or like posing other questions that aren't necessarily Bitcoin questions or Bitcoin themed or Bitcoin related, but they're related in a way that can combat the traditional thinking. So I'm someone who I like to provoke thought. I like to provoke and get people thinking, right? And I would say I'm more of a seed sower than I am like the one who sees that orange tree grow, let's
I
say.
like that.
But then I'm also someone who like with my X account, like my goal is like it started out like, hey, can I orange pill some people with my X account? And I quickly learned that, I'm not really interacting with much normies. So how am I actually going to orange pill here? How can I, while I'm learning, also build into other people and help support other people in their journey that have already been orange pilled, right? So I sort of see like what I do as a seed planter and then kind of like a pruner, if that makes sense. I'm not the one who sees and I've seen a few trees grow, but I'm more the one that kind of comes to more of the mature trees and sort of sits down where they're at as well. And I think that's the best thing that we can do in life is just meet people where they're at and understand what their needs are and their understanding and not come at it from an approach that I'm somehow better than them.
Nice, makes sense. Yeah, you know that Satoshi quote you mentioned, if you don't believe me, you don't get it, I don't have time to explain it to you. I was talking to Aubrey about that and he was like, yeah, Satoshi doesn't have time, but we do, right? We have the time to, sit down and try to orange pill you, and that's the point of this podcast as well, right? It's even if one person who watches this feels like that seed has been sowed, is that the right word? Sowed or sown?
So
Sowed.
yeah, I think both.
Yeah. So, and then it gets you thinking, right? It gets you thinking about what is money, what is inflation, and that road will eventually, hopefully, lead you to Bitcoin. And that's why we're here. That's why we're doing
Yeah.
this.
Yeah, no, exactly. The one thing I would say to that though is that yes, we have the time, but we also don't know how much time we have. And as someone who my grandma right now is currently in the hospital and is kind of fighting for her life, and
I'm
my
sorry.
other grandma, yeah, my other grandmother passed away
Hmm.
in December. So it's something that I've been thinking about a lot of we don't know when our life is going to end, and we always think that we do have more time. And I mean, history serves us, we likely do have time,
Hmm.
but there also needs to be, we need to understand the weight and the gravity of what we are talking about, that there is a time clock on it, even though we have time, but we don't know when the Canadian dollar is going to fully collapse. We don't know when all of this is going to happen. So there is an urgency, but we do have the time that we can take and and deal with it. So we don't just have to run around and scream Bitcoin at the top of our lungs, but we should also be understanding how important it is and evaluating how much time we do have and what we kind of think we have and vice versa, the time that the other people have as well. So
Hmm.
there is a bit of a time crunch that way, I think, that we need
Right.
to recognize, but
Yeah,
that's
that makes
more
sense.
like a medium term future, not.
For sure. Yeah, the only thing that's truly finite is Bitcoin and time and energy. And you're right. We have no idea how much time we any of us have, right? And we don't know how much time Bitcoin is going to be at these prices, right? If once Bitcoin goes over X amount, I mean, you could say it's probably not too far away. Bitcoin's going to basically becoming a whole coiner will become basically unachievable
I think
uh,
for many people,
already.
a whole Bitcoin is already unachievable. I mean, people who are in their mid 20s that already have financial commitments and are starting families and all that sort of stuff, like they don't have a lot of money. I think it actually is a benefit for someone who is 18, who, if they're living at home and they don't have the financial commitments yet, that they can just stack as much as they can as quickly as possible and not really have to they don't have the responsibilities of financial responsibilities. Older people who, they own homes and that sort of stuff, it's still pretty achievable for them if they actually want to make that hurdle and jump over the hurdles to be able to do it, like liquidating their, for US residents, their 401ks or TFSAs, RRSPs here, houses, other assets that way. Like it's definitely still going to be attainable for kind of the older people, but there is already a subset of people in Canada, in the United States, that it's going to be completely unachievable for them, or I wouldn't say completely unachievable, but it's going to be hard for them.
Hmm.
And then obviously in other parts of the world, right? I mean, in Africa. like where they actually need Bitcoin the most
Hmm.
currently in today, there's virtually no chance that they will ever have a whole Bitcoin. And I mean, if you just break it down to the amount of Bitcoin there is and the amount of people that are in the world, and I know we're kind of debating how much people are actually in the world today with some of
Hmm.
the stuff that is being talked about out there, but not everybody can have a whole coin. So it's also okay not to have the whole coin. It's not something that we need to look at. But yeah, obviously the more sats that you have, I think the better off you're going to be and the better situation you're going to put yourself in. So if you're attaining for a whole Bitcoin, that's great. But also there is some grace there
Even
that it's okay not to hit that target.
even 0.1 Bitcoin will change your life.
Exactly.
My Twitter account, I've pinned the tweet 21 million Bitcoin, 8 billion humans. Like not
Right.
everyone
Just
can
do the
have
math.
one. Yeah, just do the math, right? Uh, Virtually impossible, and
And
every week,
it's not even 21 million when you consider what
right?
what are locked
Uh,
up and lost.
Lost. Yeah.
So,
So
that
really, really get.
mathematical equation could actually be dwindled down a little
Right.
more. I mean, depending on what happens with AI and
Hmm.
what's the supercomputer that we're all talking about right now that
Quantum.
why is it is yeah, quantum computing.
Yeah.
Is that something that can unlock lost
Hmm.
coins and that sort of stuff? So maybe we do end up closer to the 21
And every week
million.
you've got strategy buying. I mean, how many Bitcoin did strategy buy last week? Like
I
13,000,
don't yeah, something
something like that. That's every single time that happens, they're obviously never going to sell. And so those are, 13,000 whole coiners that cannot have a whole coin, right? So there is an element of doing this quickly. And so, if you are listening and you're just getting into Bitcoin, then, you need about 100, 200 hours of study to really get it. And hopefully this podcast helps in some small way. So Joel, thank you so much. Like, listening to all of that is amazing. When you look forward to 2026, what are you most excited about that you are doing personally? What are you building? I know on your Twitter account you've got Hodlman's Apparel that you're building. Would you like to share more about that?
Yeah, it's something that I've wanted to do for a while. So one of my I guess my side hustles that I've been doing is I've been working for an apparel company in a lifestyle apparel niche, and over the years we have grown to the size of the volume that we do makes sense that we can have all the equipment ourselves. We don't need to go to other parties to fulfill and ship and create the garments and all that sort of stuff. Like we have all the equipment. And when I look around at the space of Bitcoin apparel, there's not really a lot of apparel that I would personally like to wear in terms of like what my style is and that sort of stuff. And that's not to say that, other companies aren't doing something right. Like a company just off the top of my head, like FOMO 21, I think they're doing some great stuff. It's just not necessarily the style that I'm looking for, that I
What are you looking
uh,
for? Like
want to have.
plaid?
I'm someone who's a little bit more quiet in terms of graphics. I don't like this is as busy as a shirt that I would wear.
Okay.
I'm more just like simple logos on a chest. If I'm gonna have a bigger logo, it'd actually be
Like the
on the
beaver hoodie?
back. Exactly. Honestly, the beaver hoodie is my kind of hoodie. So
Right.
like that's me.
Right.
Um,
We should get you
so
one.
yeah, hey, I'd wear it. Um, so for me, it's something that I want to start for. Um, selfishly for myself to be able to wear some Bitcoin apparel that would kind of fit the niche of style that I would want, but also using it as a way to be able to open up the door of conversations for people. So again, I'm kind of quiet. I'm kind of reserved. Like I know I'm here talking with you, but I'm a pretty introverted guy and don't necessarily just like to have those big conversations with people. But if somebody sees a logo and it doesn't even like I don't particularly see all designs having like Bitcoin in it or being like very in your face Bitcoin. It might be something a little bit more abstract and that sort of stuff. But to me, it's going to be something that piques interest, or somebody just might see and be like, hey, what is that? Like for you, like, I keep seeing you wearing this beaver like hoodie that doesn't look like roots, but what is Beaver? Right now, that opens up the door for you to actually be able to talk about and have conversation and dialogue. And those are the conversations that I like to have. I like to have the intimate conversations. I like this sort of style of talking with someone who, like, we're just kind of shooting the breeze here and are talking, and that's great. I don't really love big groups and that sort of stuff. If I am in a big group, I usually find myself drawn to, one or two other people and kind of have our side conversations in bigger groups. So that's kind of what I see with the apparel. And then the kind of way that Hodlman's is going to do it is that everything's going to be limited edition. So everything's going to have a cap. So being close to the apparel company that I work for, I don't need to order a whole bunch of clothing. So one of the things that we struggled with when we were building the company and running the company and having somebody else do it for us, and when I look at other companies and kind of the pain points that they have, is that, like, for Beaver, they probably had to go out and buy, you know, 10 larges, 10 smalls, 10 mediums, 10 extra larges, and you're holding all of this overhead. And for us, like, our extra larges and our larges sold really quickly, then our mediums, and then you're holding double XLs, smalls for like a year, and it's hard for you to want to make a reorder on that graphic until you sell it all, or, sell most, and you just end up giving some away and all that sort of stuff. And the way that I would like to do it is a design might have, a cap of 21. There will never be more than 21 of that limited design. And the way that I'm able to do it is that I don't have to worry about the sizing of the shirt. You order it, it's going to be made for you to order in the size that you want. If you want 5XL to extra small, or double X small, I think I have access to. So, but once the 21 are gone, I'm never going to reissue those, like, that graphic again. So, or that shirt color combination, that sort of stuff. And then on top of that, kind of what my hope and goal for the company is then to create a successful company that is working on a Bitcoin standard, then be able to go to other companies that, I've worked for in the past and that sort of stuff, and be like, here's a case model of how you run on a Bitcoin standard. Like, it's easy for me to go to a company right now that, I'm friends with, and say, like, hey, get on a Bitcoin standard. And they kind of laugh at me and be like, well, you've never owned a business before, you've never done it before, so, like, who are you to trust on this, right? So it's kind of just to build a rapport and
Proof
also,
of work.
like, have some proof of work and some
Right.
credibility that way. So those are kind of like the reasons behind what I want to do, but is also just like, if I'm also looking out there being like, hey, I would like some Bitcoin apparel, but I don't, and it's not to say I wouldn't wear other things that people have out there, but there's nothing that, like, I absolutely just want to have, right? So if I can fill that space for in that niche, I'd love to do that, and also, make it easier for Canadians to also buy and not have to worry about duties and taxes and all that sort of stuff, cross border and whatnot. So
So,
I think there's
do you currently have a website up, and someone listening to this, if they want to order from you, can they buy today?
Not currently. I'm in the process of developing the website. So I kind of developed the whole back end of stuff, and now I'm doing the website.
Okay.
It's something that it's my hope, within the next month it's actually up and ready and
Awesome.
going for order.
Okay.
I have some personal life circumstances right now that have kind of pushed back um, my
Launch date.
timing on
Right.
this, on
Okay.
launch date. Like, my intended launch date was to be in September.
Right.
So we're kind of far behind that, but I've had
Okay.
some
Not
pretty
too far.
major health
Okay.
issues. So, but yeah, time comes, and it's timing. So yeah, that's kind of what I'm working on for 2026, and pretty excited about. But I'm also excited to welcome another baby into the world. We're having another baby.
Oh, wow. Baby
So
number
yeah,
four.
that'll be baby number four. And I think, yeah, like, I'm bullish on the future, whether that's with Bitcoin or not Bitcoin. Like, a lot of good things are happening. So
Do you think it's because of Bitcoin that you feel more comfortable to keep having babies, or do you feel like without Bitcoin you would still have multiple children?
yeah, I had a conversation with somebody recently about that. I think my like, there's a faith component to it, that, like, I need to trust the Lord if that's what we are to do, and I think we're having babies because we trust the Lord. But also, yes, I do think that having the financial security of Bitcoin also helps in that. But to me, like those two things also merge together of faith in Bitcoin too. So it's
Totally.
not really one or the other for me.
Hmm.
But yeah, no, for sure. There's definitely the added benefit. I was actually talking to somebody about marriage and how Bitcoin has been a blessing for us in our marriage that um, like financial stress is one of the leading causes of divorce.
Right.
And that's not to say that we don't have our fights on finances or our struggles or quarrels, but it's not something that we have to like think about daily or that we're fighting with daily. Like if we want to make a purchase, it's something that yes, we think about, but Bitcoin, as much as we want to save, because we have the blessing of Bitcoin, we're also able to spend. So something that
Totally.
like maybe wasn't a great financial decision a couple years ago is that we bought our family a tent trailer to go camping with. That's something that we wanted to do as a family.
Yeah, you have to
And I
live your life,
remember
right? Yeah.
Right. And I remember looking at the price being like we were bouncing around that 58K, and knowing that, Bitcoin's going to go up from here, but also like Bitcoin has blessed me to this point, and I can liquidate a little bit of Bitcoin here and buy the tent trailer and invest that in our family, right? So
Yeah.
yeah,
That's
Bitcoin
always,
allows us to have that balance of
yeah.
both the spending and the
Yeah,
saving.
that's always going to happen, right? Like, no matter when you sell Bitcoin in a few years, you already know that because it's math, like we've spoken about, you're going to look back at it and be like, oh, okay, well, obviously that was a very bad decision relative to holding my Bitcoin. Speaking of which, how do you feel about not selling your Bitcoin and borrowing against it instead?
It's
I
yeah, it's
borrow,
something that
buy, borrow, die. Like that's what people are talking about on Twitter these days.
Yeah, I think I need to wait a little bit on what I actually think of loaning against.
Right.
It's something that I think is inevitable and is good. Um, is it good maybe today? Like is basically what I'm trying to say is the loaning against your Bitcoin currently in an infancy stage and it's not something that's mature
For
enough that
sure.
I actually want to, but I do think it's intriguing that there's the ability to do it and what that can and will look like in the future.
Hmm.
So yes, I would say futuristically, it's something that I think probably makes sense to some degree. But
Hmm.
again, you're moving away from like what I think that gold standard is of holding your own coins. Though I think for some people there's a way for you to sort of hold it like in a multi-sig and that sort of stuff, but yeah, it's interesting. I think I get to the point of like I don't I can't quite wrap my head around how we loan against Bitcoin if we're on a completely Bitcoin standard society.
Right.
Like if we're on a completely Bitcoin standard society, like how do I give my Bitcoin to then get Bitcoin because we're on a Bitcoin standard, right? So
Hmm.
then there has to be some other monetary unit of exchange,
Right.
right?
Right.
So
But we're
like
nowhere
long
close.
term,
We're nowhere
no, we're
close
no,
to
we're
that.
nowhere
Yeah.
close. So there's obviously like a gap in the here and now of
For
of
sure.
where the future gold standard is on a whole system level. So yeah, I think it's something that is worth exploring and looking at. I wouldn't loan my whole stack.
Hmm.
I would say that it's probably, if you're going to do it, maybe wise to do something like a 5 or 10% allocation and that sort of stuff. And it's just loaning, though, is something that it brings you something that you could only have in the future today, right? And it's like the time preferences that we talk about as Bitcoiners. So that's something that's more of a high time preference than a low time preference
Right. It's like
mentality, right? Of
why are you
loaning.
buying the trailer today then?
Right. If
Right.
you can't actually afford it. And I think
Hmm.
that's where Bitcoin's going to kind of push us of you're going to get what you get when you're ready for it. And
Right.
that's not, you're not just ready for it when you want something, you're ready for something when like you've kind of earned that thing, right?
Hmm.
Like I'm looking back, I'm kind of glad that I didn't buy and hold all the Bitcoin that I could have in 2013 because I was an immature kid and wouldn't have gone through the struggles and wouldn't have gone through the life circumstances, like I don't think that I would be sitting here today talking with you if I bought in 2013. I don't think that I would have met my wife. I don't think so. Then, therefore, I wouldn't have the four
The
children
butterfly
that I'm going to
effect,
have.
right?
Right? It's the butterfly effect, right? You could argue that my life would be better, but
We don't
the
know.
four or five greatest things in my life, being my wife and my four kids, like the one that's about to come, are the most greatest things that I have. So if I change that one thing in 2013, I probably don't have those five people. So
And this
um,
podcast may have never happened, which
exactly.
might be the most important thing.
Yeah, for sure. No, and
Good.
we joke about that, but I
Yeah.
do think that there is something important that's happening in this conversation, if not just between you and I. I'm growing and I'm developing through this and having this conversation with you, and you're having me think of things, and I'm getting value from this. So I do appreciate that.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you so much, Joel. This has been amazing. So we've now reached my favorite part of this show, which is the rapid fire round. So this round, I'm gonna ask you a few questions, and you can answer in one word or a few words. But the main thing is that it needs to be rapid,
Quick.
quick,
All
right?
right.
Like your first impulsive answer. Okay? Are you
All
ready?
right. Yeah, I'm ready. I'm a little scared, but I'm ready. I've
No
been
reason to be
anticipating
scared.
this, but it's like, you watch those Family Feuds, and it's like they'll be like, name an Apple product, and they're like Granny Smith. It's like, yeah, you talked about an apple, but we're talking about the wrong apple. So maybe the first thing that comes to my head, I gotta figure out what the filter is. But
Okay, there are no trick questions here.
all right,
So nothing to be worried about. So sit back, relax, take a deep breath, and tell me when you're ready.
I'm ready.
Let's go. All right. Best Bitcoin wallet for beginners.
For beginners, I was gonna say Cold Card being the best wallet. For beginners, probably Blue Wallet, just being an open
Hmm.
source
Super
like hot
easy,
wallet.
accessible,
Yeah.
right? Best book for orange pilling someone in 2026.
Orange pilling. What is it called? I just got a book from someone, BitDug on Twitter. Why can't I think of the name? But it's a super easy, quick read that is great for beginners. Yeah, I'm sorry that I'm blanking on it. Maybe we can add that into the show notes after. I'll get you a link
Okay,
for it.
we will definitely add that in. Uh, hardest truth Bitcoin taught you.
Say it again.
Hardest truth Bitcoin taught you.
That the dollar that I once thought was good is bad.
Most misunderstood thing about Bitcoiners.
About Bitcoiners. Um, Toxic is what comes to mind. Like I think there's more love from a Bitcoiner than there is the toxicity. I think
Right.
the toxicity for many people just comes out of a place of love. Um it's not meant to be malicious. It's meant to be like, I love you, and I need you to understand this now before things happen. And it's coming out of a good heart. Just the way that it maybe comes out isn't.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Okay, one habit every Bitcoiner should build.
One habit that every Bitcoiner should build, I'm going to go off the board here and say that you should attend a Bitcoin meetup.
Nice. We've been doing those in Toronto, so if you're in Toronto, please do come. Okay, last one. If you had to explain Bitcoin to a 10-year-old in one sentence, what would you say?
Play this game with me. I just got a game, um, Mission Bitcoin. I've been playing it with my kids,
Yeah.
and it's just a really great game of teaching the importance of cold storage and that. So yeah, if I was to do it in one sentence, and again, I'm going off the board with it, would be come play this game with me, and I would play a board game.
Sweet, man. That makes a lot of sense for a 10-year-old. Cool, Joel. So thank you so much for joining the Why Bitcoin Wins podcast. It's been an absolute pleasure chatting with you. Do you have any last words for the audience?
If Well, I guess if you want to reach out and chat with me, I'm on X, Joel Hodlman. Very open to chat and talk. But it would be just continue stacking, continue talking and thinking about Bitcoin, whether that's online or in your circles of friends and all that sort of stuff. And yeah, just keep on stacking and don't stress too much about it. Just do what you can and know that brighter days are coming, but today is pretty bright because the future is bright as well. So,
Love that, man. Thank you.
well, thanks for having me.